All right, good morning, or I guess good afternoon now, everyone. My name is Sarah Domke, and I'm a Senior Deputy District Attorney here at the Adams County DA's office, and Mark Rule is a Senior Investigator with the office. We are part of the Financial Crimes Unit, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, but for now, I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. All right, is the PowerPoint up? Can everybody see that?
Yes, yeah, looks great.
Yes? Okay, wonderful. So as Hannah had already said, you're here for the Protecting Your Business from Fraud and Embezzlement webinar given by the 17th Judicial District Attorney's Office. Just to give you a little bit more information about our office. Sorry. So Mark and I work for your elected district attorney, Brian Mason. We have several different units in the office. We have district court, county court, a special victims unit. We have the child victims unit. What we're going to be talking about today, though, is from our unit, the financial crimes unit. In the financial crimes unit, we investigate and prosecute financial exploitation cases in Adams and Broomfield counties. So some examples of those are some of the higher theft cases, at-risk theft and exploitation, contractor fraud, embezzlement, and organized ID theft. And even though these are some different categories of theft, we're really prosecuting under the same statutes or particular kinds of crimes in each case. It just kind of differs how the theft is occurring and what the amount is. So theft, forgery, cybercrime, and check fraud are, I would say, probably our most common. And even when we say embezzlement, as we'll talk about later, it is really just simple theft done in a different way. The Financial Crimes Unit also coordinates with state and federal agencies regarding financial crimes across the state. We do training on financial crimes, both with other attorneys as well as law enforcement agencies, so that all of us can be working together and improving our skills and improving our techniques when we're investigating and prosecuting these cases. We also present on fraud awareness to local community groups like this conversation that we're having today. So the three main points, the three big things that we're going to be talking about today when we're talking about protecting yourself and protecting your business are education, prosecution of these cases, and then a couple case examples at the end. The biggest piece is education. And what we kind of like to say is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. So oftentimes we'll see people doing things in a little bit different ways than the last person, or we might see a scam that's a little bit different. But for the most part, the red flags are always going to be the same. And the ways that you protect yourself are also always going to be the same. And really a big part of that is just kind of understanding what's out there and what you can do with what's out there. So the first part of this presentation, I'm just going to give, this is a little bit more of kind of a public service announcement. So we're just going to go through some common kinds of fraud that we're seeing. And then we're going to spend the bulk of the presentation on the embezzlement section and things that apply to small businesses. So when we're talking about common scams and we're talking about computer fraud, one example, and these can happen either to your personal accounts or to your professional or business accounts, are phishing scams. So for example, you get an email that you want a prize and that you just need to respond back and verify name, social security number, date of birth, bank account, password, or it might say, click here for a free or low cost item, whatever that item may be. When you click on that item, it goes to a malicious website. Or if you provide any of that information, then now someone who shouldn't have that information has it. And they're probably going to use it for nefarious purposes. There's the spear phishing scam, which I learned about in our cybercrime training that we took last week for work, which is a targeted attack using information obtained from social media. So like LinkedIn or Facebook to establish credibility and obtain information. An example of that would be maybe you post something on your LinkedIn saying, congratulations to the team at Kitchen Masters for hitting our $100,000 goal or something like that. Someone may see that on your LinkedIn or on one of your employees' LinkedIn and then reach out to them personally and say, wow, I heard about your big news. Congratulations. Can you tell me more about how you did that? And then maybe it goes into what computer programs are you using? How is it that you access those, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's really building trust and building relationships to be able to get that information. So just be careful about what you post. So a different way to do that last example would just be to say, great job, team, so proud of you, and just some kind of general graphic instead of providing any information about exact amounts or timelines or things like that. Another one is the bogus bill or an invoice. So you get a letter or an invoice or an email demanding payment for something you've never heard of. Don't just pay it thinking that you need to. Scammers will sometimes send fake bills threatening collections to try to scare you into paying those. Real legitimate creditors will be able to produce proof that the debt exists in the first place. If the debt is real and you weren't aware of it, then you might be the victim of identity theft. And we'll talk more about how to handle these situations when they come up in a couple minutes. Another example of computer fraud is the order problem email or text. I actually got one of these text messages last week on my phone, and I'm embarrassed to say I totally fell for it because I was busy and I was stressed with some other stuff going on and doing a lot of holiday shopping as well as work stuff, and just responded to the text without thinking about it and then had to cancel my credit card. So that's another thing I think to remember with all of these is that they happen a lot and they happen to everyone. And if you do end up kind of falling for the scam or getting tricked by it or doing this, it's really simple to just stop it. But it's embarrassing to admit that it happened, but the quicker you just say, yep, it happened, I fell for it, and fix it, then the better off you're going to be. So the order problem email is that the email or text pops up from an online retailer or from USPS, that was mine, FedEx, or UPS, which actually I got another one today from UPS. I did not fall for this one. That claims there's a problem with an order you recently made and you need to click here to fix it. Or with the USPS, FedEx, or UPS ones, it's been saying things like there's a problem with your address and you need to pay $1.50 extra, or we need some additional information. And then they ask for credit card number, expiration date, security code, your blood type, the name of your firstborn, all that fun stuff. And in a hectic moment, I just filled all that out. It will go to an official looking website, which it did, with a form where you filled out personal and financial information. It's likely a malicious website and you've given your personal information. So what I should have done that I did later when I realized that it was fake is go directly to the retailer or delivery company's website to check on the issue. Don't get the website through the link on this text or email, just in a separate browser. Open up your Amazon or Etsy or whatever the case may be. They included a tracking number on mine that was false. Also, there's usually spelling mistakes and some things like that, which I should have seen. So anyway, I have seen these a lot, especially lately. I also was with some friends over the weekend. They said they've been getting a lot of these. So I guess 'tis the season, and just don't open it. Here's another example, something that has happened to companies. This one actually happened to my dad, where you have a tech support scam. So out of nowhere, you receive a call or a screen like the one on this screen, and it pops up, maybe from a reputable company like Microsoft or an antivirus company. They tell you you have a virus or an error, and you have to call the number before you lose all your data. They then ask you to allow them access or to remote into your computer. Once in your computer, the scammer can look at your personal information or add malware that will infect your computer, or add spyware that they can get your information in the future. Or the one that happened with my dad was, it was a kind of a combination of this and a gift card scam, where it was something like this. And then the number that he called said, you've had these false charges, we can fix it, and you just need to bring us $200 in gift cards at a certain location. And that's when he started getting suspicious and didn't end up doing it. But this is how the whole thing started, and this is how a lot of them start. So some ways that we've seen some scams over the phone, the law enforcement scam. So someone with a Washington, D.C. area code calls, claims your business's identity was used in a crime. They may claim to be law enforcement demanding that you will be arrested if you don't send money to fix it. They may refer you to a website that looks legitimate with the caller's picture on it. Law enforcement is not going to call you unless you are already involved in a case, or unless they call and say, we think you may have been the victim of a crime, and are asking for more information about it. If that is the case, ask them for their phone number, for their badge number, hang up the phone, call that number back, or call the main line of that police department and ask for that person. It's not a big deal. No police officer is going to be offended if you do that. There's also also on the law enforcement scam, a lot of times they'll saying, yeah, you'll be arrested if you don't send money to fix it. A police officer is never going to ask you for money over the phone or ask you to pay a ticket over the phone. They will not call you to do that. That is just not something that they do. The wrong number text, so starting with something innocuous and then asking for money or about interest in cryptocurrency, et cetera, et cetera. There was a little bit of a time where I felt like I got a lot of these. Someone would text and say something like, hey, what are you doing, from like a number I didn't know, or like, hey, Sally, how's it going? And instinctually you would want to say, who is this? Who are you? How did you get this phone number? I'm not Sally, I'm Sarah. What are you talking about? And then that kind of starts a conversation and then can go into some of these more nefarious means. Same thing, the call from the IRS is the law enforcement scam. They might say you have a warrant for unpaid taxes, you need to pay some fines. Again, this is not going to be something that they're doing over the phone. And if you get a letter from the IRS and you're suspicious about it, then go to a different place, look them up on a website, call IRS and ask them about it. And they should be able to answer those questions. Mark, do you have stuff on this?
No, I think the big thing here is just think about what they're telling you before you respond in any fashion. If it's a law enforcement scam, police don't collect money for court cases. That's the court's position. So the police are never going to take money for a bond. That just doesn't work. For like gift cards and things like that, they don't take those. You can't use a gift card to pay a bond.
Exactly. Awesome. Thank you. The next one up, and this is kind of along the same lines. So other kinds of financial frauds and common things that we're seeing. So gift cards, demand or request for payment in gift cards or for cash only. This is pretty common in the relationship scams, or what we sometimes call like the grandkid scams or the kid scams, where on the relationship one, there's a relationship that forms online and then gift cards are being requested for an emergency purpose. You get a call out of the blue saying that your son or your grandson or daughter or cousin or whoever was on a trip, they're in jail. This person's calling out of the goodness of their heart and they need a bunch of gift cards to bail that person out. And you need to do it right now. You need to do it right away. That's always kind of an indication that you don't need to do it. And in fact, you shouldn't do it because it is most likely a scam. Venmo, Cash App, PayPal, and Zelle are wonderful. But some scammers have started using them as ways to get money. So you suddenly get $100 in your Venmo account. And the sender then says, oh, whoops, sorry about that. That was an accident. Can you just send me that $100 back? Later, you find out that original $100 was sent from a stolen debit card. It gets removed from your account Now you're out $100 and the scammer made $100. So never accept money on Venmo or send anyone money that you don't know or check on. If you want to check on it, contact Venmo separately apart from this and make sure that nothing's being done with that. But really, if you're getting money from someone that you don't know, it's a scam. I think that's the baseline. And as Mark said, when you're listening to what people are telling you, just kind of look at what's going on. If it seems out of the ordinary, if it seems fishy, if it seems too good to be true, then 99.9% of the time, it's all of those things. Cryptocurrency scams are becoming more and more popular because really not a lot of us know what cryptocurrency is. I've had cases involving cryptocurrency, and I'll be honest with you, I barely feel like I kind of sort of know what it is, and I wouldn't even be comfortable probably using it. Sometimes scammers will demand that you pay them in cryptocurrency like a Bitcoin, or they'll promise to make you lots of money with little risk by helping you invest in cryptocurrency and steer you to a website that looks legitimate. And as we've seen in the news lately, even some companies that seem pretty legit for a little bit have not been. So just always be super careful with these, and if you decide to invest your money in crypto. So some common threads, some things that we've seen that are 6 signs of some of these common scams, where if you see these things, just stop and walk away or hang up the phone or log off the computer or whatever the case may be. So people are contacting you out of the blue that you've never met before. They dangle bait, usually money, like, hey, you can make $500, but you do have to pay $50 for this online class. They want your personal information. You have to pay them first before getting anything in return. Payment is made in gift cards, crypto, etc. And they play on emotions. So those emotions can be curiosity, like in the case of someone saying, hey, who is this? Oh, sorry, I have the wrong number. And then 5 minutes later, hey, can I talk to you about this one thing? Or hey, I'm actually like really down on my luck. Do you think you can help me out? They play on fear and they play on greed. So those are all things to keep in mind. You may not have all 6 of these things at one time, but you will certainly have one or more in any of these scams. When it happens, you have some different options. You can hang up the phone or redirect from the website before providing any money or personal information. Look up the phone number for the agency or the entity that they say they are with, independent from the information they have provided. So they can say, oh yeah, just call this phone number back. No, just separate, go to an independent website, find a different phone number. Double check the information. And if and when you determine it is a scam, keep the information and reach out to local law enforcement. Contact your financial institutions, report fraud, and make sure accounts are not compromised. In my example the other day, I think I sent the text back at maybe 11 o'clock in the morning. And by 2:30, 3 o'clock, I realized that I had probably been scammed, and told my husband about it, told him maybe cancel the credit card. He went on, and there had already been 2 charges on the credit card. So he canceled it, put a fraud alert, all done, got it taken care of, which was great. One kind of caveat, or not so much a caveat, but something to just kind of keep in mind, is that unlike embezzlement that we're going to talk about shortly, when you know the person that is committing these crimes, a lot of these internet scams, these phone scams, we do not know who's doing it. We have to know who's doing it to charge someone. So law enforcement appreciates information. We appreciate it so that we can spread the information and let other people know how to prevent it. But the chances of kind of catching someone, so to speak, on these scams and then prosecuting them is pretty low, just because it's very hard to determine who these people are. However, we do appreciate the information, but the biggest thing for your protection is contacting your institutions, reporting the fraud, make sure your accounts are not compromised. And if they are, then canceling those cards or those things and getting new ones, which isn't fun. Like I said, it's not fun. It's a little bit embarrassing, but doing it sooner rather than later is really your best bet. General tips on protecting you and your business from ID theft. So people who are taking mail or taking information, and a lot of these I'm sure that you've already heard before. So locking up or destroying your private records and statements, shredding them, not just putting them in the trash, or put them in a shredder, like say like an Iron Mountain, who then comes and does that destruction for you on a regular basis. Secure your mail. So make sure you don't have mail sitting in mailboxes or even post office boxes, certainly not sitting in your car or in an open briefcase for long periods of time. Safeguard not only your social security number, financial numbers, checks, I-9s, W-2s, but also those of your employees. And not even those of your employees, but also of your customers. So really kind of take those extra steps to safeguard not just yourself, but anyone associated with your business. Don't leave a paper trail. Don't leave receipts out, invoices out with sensitive information on it. Again, it's just a lot of these are crimes of opportunity. And so if you take the opportunity away, then the crime isn't going to happen. You can protect your credit cards from skimmers with an RFID sleeve. You can implement and enforce a privacy policy regarding customer and employee information. That will also help if someone gets a scam involving your company, so that then they can call you and say, you know, what is your privacy policy? This person's asking me for my social security number. Is that appropriate? And then you can say, no, as part of our privacy policy, we do not ask for social security numbers. And then that is protecting your reputation and also protecting your customers. Finally, review your financial statements carefully. Destroy old or unused cards or account, especially associated with your business. Having those cards, having those checkbooks, they're not laying around, but having them around, again, that's a crime of opportunity. And if you take away the opportunity, then you are taking away the crime. So just kind of keep those things in mind as you're doing your general literal housekeeping. All right, so let's talk about embezzlement and how it affects small businesses, how it affects businesses in general. Embezzlement is something that can really do a lot of damage to your company. Just some statistics about embezzlement. So workplace crime costs US businesses over $50 billion a year, according to a study done by CNBC. 55% of embezzlement occurs at companies with fewer than 100 employees, so what we would call a small business. 30% of business failures can be chalked up to embezzlement, which is a lot considering we just went through a major pandemic, which also hit places pretty hard. The median loss for a single incident of embezzlement for small businesses is nearly $290,000, which can prove fatal for some companies. So a pretty big number, and that's just that's the median. That's the absolute middle is nearly $300,000, which for a lot of companies is a big hit. Another thing to kind of think about in that sense, and what Mark and I see really as a common thread through a lot of our embezzlement cases, is that not only do you have the amount that's taken, but then oftentimes there will be penalties associated with that amount. So the accountant isn't just stealing money, but the accountant is also failing to pay taxes. And so then you have to pay the back taxes and pay penalties on top of that. So a lot of times your losses may be even more than that $300,000 amount based on penalties for non-payment from other entities. Who you can say, we were a victim of embezzlement, we were a victim of fraud. And I think sometimes that allows for more time, but you still have to pay those penalties back, which is a big hit. Embezzlers commonly are executives and or those in management. And a lot of this has to do with access. So when we talk about these common embezzlers, we're talking about people with access. So people that are able to steal the larger amounts from businesses. Around 37% are in finance or accounting, but 37% clearly it can occur in other departments as well. A lot of times these are individuals who work alone. And we're not saying that in the law enforcement sense of they're committing the crime alone. We're saying it in the sense of these are people who are working from home a lot or who have a separate office in the back away from everyone else. They're not hanging out with everybody. They don't have tasks that overlap a lot with other people. And so they literally are alone. And there's not a lot of people watching them or interacting with them. And so it makes it easy for them to do these things under the radar. The most common methods for embezzlement, 34% involved access to cash or deposits and then diverting those funds into their own account that they control. So that's the biggest way. And that's frankly a lot of the ways that Mark and I have seen these cases go as well. 22% are check fraud, where an embezzler is forging or altering the employer's checks. So again, those could either be current checks or maybe you have an old account that's still open and you have the checkbooks for that. And the embezzler goes in and is just writing those as if business is being done as usual out of those accounts. Oftentimes they'll have access to all of the accounts. So they may be able to divert money from one account to another or put money from an active account into someone inactive account and then give themselves that money. Again, a lot of this is occurring because there's not a ton of oversight in these people. And we're going to talk about that in a few moments as well. 14% of incidents involve vendor invoicing and false billing, where an employee is altering or forging invoices from real vendors, or they make up a fake vendor, send the invoice, and then route the payments back to their own accounts. That takes a little bit more work and a little bit more maneuvering, which is why commonly we're seeing the diversion or the check forging, because really it's pretty simple when you don't have anyone watching. And then 10%, so a little bit lower number again, involves credit card fraud and is most often committed by managers who have personal purchases on company cards or issue themselves unauthorized cards. There's a case currently that's pending where a person's just making their own gas purchases with the company's credit card, which at first isn't a lot and it really adds up over time, and they're not supposed to be doing it. But they have access to that card, or I think a lot of times we call it like the P card. And so, instead of using that for lunch for everybody, for someone in the office's birthday, they're buying all of their holiday presents with that. Some less common embezzlement methods include property or merchandise theft, payroll fraud, or fraudulent loans taken out in the company's name. We have seen all of those though, which is why those are important things to remember when you are looking at what your employees are doing, which as an employer, we're hoping that we're going to kind of give you some of those skills or some of those things to think about in this presentation. So I want to talk briefly about the statute, the criminal statute of theft. This is not it in its entirety, but anytime we have a theft case, and oftentimes with embezzlement cases and we have the theft, the baseline things that we need to prove are that the defendant, so the person, we need to know who did it, without authorization or by deception, took a thing of value of another person with the intent to permanently deprive the other person of that. And usually we're talking about money. So took a thing of value, US dollars, of another with the intent to permanently deprive. They're not paying it back. They have no intention to re-divert it or pay it back at any point. So think of these as we're going through some of the things that we're going to talk about next. And just kind of think to yourself, how would I prove that this person wasn't authorized to be taking these actions? So wasn't authorized to write that check, or they were using deception. They told me they were doing one thing, and in fact, they were doing another. So lying. With the intent to permanently deprive. So showing that this was an intentional act that was done with the intent to permanently deprive you of that money. So really keep those in mind. And I would say the big one when we're talking about all of this is without authorization. And that's where Mark and I have run into problems of making sure that we know this person was not authorized, because it's really easy. And we've had it happen sometimes where people will go back and be like, oh no, I was allowed to buy my own gas money because I drive to and from work. Or no, I was totally okay to be writing checks out of that. That was completely fine. And so we're going to give you some tips on that in just a minute. And I'm just looking through the chat since we're kind of at a transition point. Just to check on these questions before we go further.
Yeah, if anyone has questions, feel free to put those in or come off mute and ask those. I do have a few questions that on the fraud side that we do hear sometimes from clients. And the big one really is any advice you have for businesses who process payments through their website online, ways to protect their customers. Is there anything they can be doing to help their customers on their own websites?
So I think, and I can let Mark answer if he has more technical information on that. I would say two pieces to that. One is for not falling for those scams where people can be putting spyware or malware or ransomware on your computer. So some of the phishing scams or tech support scams that we had talked about before that give people that access that you don't want them to have. And I think the second part is having a very clear and defined privacy policy that you and all of your employees are aware of. So keeping the information that you are given by your clients protected. And whether that be particular programs, locations, who has authorization to that information, what information it is you're requesting, just really making sure that everyone in the company is very aware of exactly what information is and is not off limits, so that then you're able to relate that back and say to that customer, like, no one from my company should be asking you for a social security number, or no, you shouldn't be getting an email about mailing that's not coming from me. So those would be my thoughts on it. But Mark, do you have additional thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the things that would help as far as helping to protect your customers is going to be making sure that whatever payment services or system that you use, it's secure. Using SSL or one of the other secure systems to record or to complete the transactions. Keep in mind that you shouldn't ever capture and save entire credit card numbers, because then you're opening yourself up. If there's a breach of your system, if somebody manages to get into your system and it breaches and they take a list of credit cards that you've stored on your system, that's opening you up a little bit. So don't store full 16-digit credit cards. Don't store the CVV numbers, all of those things. Let your transaction service that you pay for do those things, and you don't have to worry about that. Remember that any data that you collect, you're now responsible for. So if you do collect social security numbers, you have to treat those with a higher level of security than you would just a name or an address. If you collect dates of birth and social security numbers, all of that is stuff that you now have to subject to higher levels of security within your own system.
Great, thank you. Those are really helpful tips. And then one follow-up to that would be, if there is malicious activity on your business's website, do you have a duty to let your customers know about that? Like someone who maybe has made a recent purchase through your site, even if it wasn't them that was scammed?
Well, we're getting into an area of civil liability versus criminal liability, and
Sure.
we don't engage in civil law here. My common sense statement would be that if you can show that you had a data breach, you have a certain ethical obligation to let your customers know if you believe that their information was compromised.
Mhm.
You don't have to let every customer you've ever had know, but people that may have been compromised, I think you would
Mhm.
certainly have some sort of an obligation to.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. And I understand it's a different side of the law. So for anyone who does have more questions about those specifics, since those are some common questions we see, we do have legal consultants at the North Metro SBDC that would be happy to talk more with you about any questions you're having like that. So any other questions from anyone on before we move more into the embezzlement side?
So now, as we get started into this next part, one of the things that I want to reinforce is that from this point on, we're really talking about an employee who has been given certain accesses to things, to your financials and to your cash accounts and things like that. And they're in a position of trust that they're violating that trust. In my experience, I would say that the vast majority of these end up being either front desk personnel who take cash as part of their routine duties, or bookkeepers that are both accounts payable and accounts receivable and payroll, and they're a one-person shop in bookkeeping. The majority of the times that I see these cases come in, they fall into one of those two categories.
Awesome, thank you. And so we'll go. So in talking about that, we've kind of developed this acronym, and this acronym goes into who you are hiring for these positions, as well as things to think about when that person is in the position. So your oversight and your involvement does not end when you hire someone, even if it's a person with a sterling reputation that has a very clean background check. You constantly need to be kind of keeping on this. And so this encompasses all those things. So first of all, when you're thinking about hiring this person, so a front desk person taking money, an accountant, a bookkeeper, someone that is going to be issuing checks, payroll, anything like that, any person that comes into any kind of contact with money at all. Because money's just, it's tricky. We all want it. We all want more of it. We're all kind of wired that way. And so having trust in your employees and having the proper oversight can really help solve a lot of problems before they start. So first of all, when you're looking at who you're going to hire for these positions, look at time and experience. How long has someone been doing that job? What is their experience like? We've had a couple lately where people have been recommended, and maybe they're just, or they say, hey, I took, an accounting class, or I just got this certificate and I feel pretty good about it. And can I try it out at your company? And people will say yes. And it's just, that might not be the best option. Also, the more time and experience someone has, the more opportunity that they have to build on our reputation. What is their reputation in the community? What kind of relationships they have. And relationships, we'll kind of come back to that, but their reputation in the business community. Check them out on LinkedIn, check them out on groups like the one that you are all in today and other similar groups like this. See what they're like, see what their reputation is. If their reputation is they were only here for a little bit and then I noticed some weird things happening, or even just they're bouncing around a lot, even if no one's picked up on anything yet. Those are obviously red flags that you want to be aware of. When we talk about relationships, think about relationships they have with people outside your business, but also the relationships that they have with people inside your business, including family relationships. So is this someone's ne'er-do-well grandson that seems like they've gotten it together, but now they want to do the accounting for your business? And so you're going to have two different layers of difficulty with this person. Is it someone that's part of your family that you feel obligated to give a job to, or that it might be hard to have difficult conversations with? Keep those things in mind. Also, when we talk about relationships, we've seen some things lately where we've gotten a recommendation from a friend of a friend or a recommendation at a high school reunion of, oh, this person's done this for me. It's fine. And yeah, they're a little weird, but I think it's okay. And it has ended up being very not okay. So really just consider those things. On the other hand, if they have a relationship with people that you trust, that you've always had good business dealings with, if they have a reputation that's good, great. That's awesome. There are a lot of people that are doing things the right way out there. And so this isn't to say that everyone's going to have a bad reputation or a weird relationship. So you understanding the position, and you is both the beginning of understanding, but also you as the employer, you need to understand what it is you're asking this person to do, all of the accounts they have access to, all of the information that they have access to, so that you know if things are going out of bounds. Part of understanding the position as well is that you are very clearly indicating everything about this position in writing to the person that is accepting the position. And we're going to go to that on the next slide as well. But when we talk about that without authorization, it needs to be made crystal clear in writing up front exactly what the position is. What are they authorized to do? What are they not authorized to do? And you need to have access and understanding of all of those things as well, so that you can provide appropriate oversight. S, scrutinize, run background checks, do multiple things, call references, make sure those references check out, double check the references. I think there's probably no scrutiny level that's too high when you have someone that's dealing with money from your business. It's just too great a risk not to do all of this on the front end, no matter how awesome they may seem or how awesome they might say they are. And some people are really good at it. And then finally, track. So this kind of goes hand in hand with understanding the position, is that once you have people in these positions, you are constantly double checking. You're going into those accounts and you're making sure that there's no strange purchases. You're double checking the credit card statements and making sure that there's no unauthorized purchases, or that purchases aren't being made at random times or on random things. Everything that that person is authorized to do, you have access to and are constantly double checking and tracking. I think a lot of what Mark and I have seen is I would not use the word lazy. I think I would just use the word busy. Is that owners are busy with other tasks, are busy with the business of running a business, which I would never be able to take on in a million years. And when you have someone that you trust or that you think you can trust that is handling these other matters, then they are allowed to handle them without a lot of oversight. And no matter how busy you are, no matter how much trust you have in that person, it's really important to just keep tracking them, whether it's been 3 months or 3 years or 30 years. Just always make sure that you're double checking those things. And kind of similar even to those scams that we talked about, the earlier that you see it, the less damage it's going to have for you. So when we talk about these investigations and prosecuting these investigations, help us help you. Some common things that we are going to ask for, or that a police officer, probably a detective in a financial crimes unit, is going to ask you for. They're going to ask for a timeline of employment with the individual that you suspect of embezzlement. We're going to ask for conditions of employment. What is their compensation? What is their responsibility? All of this needs to be in writing, all the way down to Christmas bonuses needs to be written and recorded. What is their salary? What are their bonuses? What are extra things? What is commission? Anything and everything needs to be written down and saved. Otherwise, it's really hard for us to say that they were acting without authorization, or for us to say that this was actually theft, that they weren't entitled to something. Because a lot of times we'll have people say, oh, we never really decided on a salary. And so, you know, I would just take money out when I needed it, figuring that it was all going to add up to the amount that we agreed on. And then we're in kind of a tricky place of trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they took that money without authorization or that they took that money by deception. So make sure that those conditions are very clear at the outset and then that you provide those conditions to us. What are they authorized to do? Tasks, accounts that they're allowed to have access to, computers that they're allowed to have access to. Have all of that information readily available and organized, and it will help us prosecute these cases efficiently and expeditiously, which we'll talk about the importance of that on the next slide. The big thing really though is oversight and accountability. A lot of these reports can probably be headed off at the pass or be made very small. If you are providing the proper oversight and if you're constantly ensuring basically accountability in the accountants. So the expression trust but verify. Always, always, always be double checking and verifying. So timing is everything. This slide is incorrect. I made this slide. It's wrong. Mark corrected me. He's right. Statute of limitations. So we have to prosecute cases within 3 years for felonies and within 18 months for misdemeanors. And the clock starts ticking at or about the date and place charged. So the time that it's reported to police really, or the date of discovery. So when you as the employer knew or should have known that something was up. So a person showing up to work in a new car that you know they can't afford and you've got some weird accounting issues going on, probably isn't should have known. But if you have a different accountant or someone else come in and run your numbers and they say something's up, who has access to these accounts, and it's only you and this other person, that would most likely be considered should have known. So that's why it's really important for you to report this as soon as possible and for you to have a lot of that information ready for us so that we can prosecute it within that 3-year time period. We've run into situations where civil investigations have been done, outside accountants, outside people have come in. All of that has taken almost 3 years, and then we have not been able to charge it within that 3-year window. It does not need to go to trial or be pled or anything like that within the 3 years, but we have to charge it within 3 years of that date that you knew or should have known some of this was going on. So just really kind of keep that in mind if things like this are happening.
Something to keep in mind on
Mark,
that.
yep.
Something to keep in mind is the law enforcement agency that's investigating, whether that be a local police department, the sheriff's department, or even this office, to do a thorough criminal investigation into an embezzlement can very easily take 18 months to 2 years, just for the investigation side of it. So if you hesitate on contacting law enforcement and you kind of decide, well, maybe I can get them to agree to pay the money back, and then we don't have to go through all of that. If those kinds of things happen and you burn up very much time at all, it could easily end up in a situation where we don't get the case charged within the statute of limitations, and therefore they will never get charged with that crime.
All right, we have a couple case examples that I think we can actually do in the last 5 minutes. This is us. This is the financial crimes unit. So if you want to take a screenshot of this, I work with another senior deputy DA, Danny Paulson. We have Mark, and then we have our legal assistant, Joni Briggs. This is the phone number for the main office, and ask for any one of us if you want to report this information or talk about any of these things. I'm now going to attempt to share my screen, which let's see how that goes. All right, is that up there now? The woman sentenced to 15 years?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, Mark, I'm gonna have you talk about this one because you know more of this information than I do.
Okay.
You're more
So
familiar than I am.
This is a case that we prosecuted back in, I believe the prosecution started in 2018. But a woman was hired as a bookkeeper mid 2012. She should have made about 11.5 for the remainder of the year. She paid herself 12.2, and the owner didn't pay any attention to that. Didn't think it was a big deal. So in 2013, her annual salary was supposed to be 33.2. She paid herself 102,000. Owner didn't notice. The reason the owner didn't notice is because the owner gave her full control of the QuickBooks files. He actually had to ask her for the passwords when he wanted to go in and look at something. When she would do that, when he would ask for the passwords, she would say, well, what are you looking for? I can find it quicker. And so he would just put his faith in her and let that happen. She continued to do similar activity. In 4 years, her total income in a 4-year time period was $744,000. That was more than the owner took home, and it was almost all of the liquid cash that the business transacted. Again, she was given sole access to the QuickBooks. He had to ask for the password. When he would ask her for something, she would manipulate the reports to hide her activity. It was to the degree that in this particular company, payday was every Friday. Payroll was done on Thursdays. If she was on vacation, on a couple of occasions, she was on a vacation out of state for a week, would fly home on Thursday morning, do the payroll, and then fly back Thursday night to meet with her family again on the vacation. And the homeowner, or I'm sorry, the business owner didn't think anything about it, didn't think that was strange at all. Ultimately, she was sentenced to 15 years for stealing $744,000. The owner of the company has acknowledged that he will probably never see more than a few $1,000s in restitution because she's in prison. By the time she gets out, she won't have the ability to pay any significant amounts towards it. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And this is a case that we're currently investigating. A bookkeeper with a company or a company group. There were actually 3 companies within the group. She had been the bookkeeper for more than 10 years, very trusted, did a great job for them. She helped transition through the original owner. When the owner's son decided he wanted to buy the company out and dad could retire, she helped through that transition with ownership changes and things, new accounts, all those things happened. She continued on with the new owner as the bookkeeper, again, a trusted person. A few years into, well, this year, the owner found some mail on her desk when she was not at her desk that indicated that they had some overdue credit cards. He questioned her about it. She said that she'd get the statements ready, and she never produced those statements to him. When he confronted her again about it, she said, I'll take care of it, but I'm not feeling good. I'm going to go home. I'll get that stuff to you tomorrow. She never returned to the office in a work capacity. Right now, we're at $1.2 million in credit card transactions that the company paid for, dating back to 2015. I have more credit cards, and and that total will go up. We're also looking at some of the other fashions that we talked about with extra payroll checks, fictitious companies that she may have created and put into the vendor list so that she could pay vendors that are actually herself. Those are all things that now we've got to look at. But in this particular case, the owner has acknowledged that he's never going to see a dime of that money back again, probably. His company is fortunately healthy enough, and this took a period of years to accrue, so they're likely going to be able to survive this. But it's been devastating to him and his family. This woman actually took some of the accounts that the old owner had, the original owner, that they never closed, and then started using those credit cards, actually requested additional credit cards be issued on that account in her personal name. And that's how she was able to avoid all of this. So the lesson there is when you finish using an account, when you decide you're not going to need an account anymore, close it. Don't leave it open. Make sure you get those closed. Credit cards, make sure you get those closed. Don't have them available as a just in case kind of thing. You can always apply for a new line of credit if you need it, but leaving those open and available to nefarious people is going to cause you problems. So those are a couple of cases that we wanted to kind of give you an idea of how they're working. Interestingly enough, you know, in the one slide we showed that about 10% of embezzlements occur with the use of a credit card, the criminal use of a credit card, and the biggest case that we have active right now is exactly that. So, are there any questions, comments, concerns about the discussion that we've had?
I don't see any in the chat, but anyone, if you do have any final questions, please put those in there, or feel free to come off mute. And we will include the phone number that you'd mentioned in our follow-up email that goes out to everyone. So if you do have questions, oh, and there's Mark's email there. Thank you. If you do have questions that you think of later on, I'm sure they would be happy to answer those for you. And we really appreciate all this information. It's not a fun topic to have to consider for your business, but as we've seen, is so important. And as with a lot of business topics, the more you think about it ahead of time before something bad happens, the easier it's going to be to, you know, go through that situation. So thank you again so much for all that information. Any last words of advice or anything in closing?
I think the one thing that I would want people to keep in the front of their mind is, because of the statutes of limitations and the amount of time that these cases take to investigate, if you have concerns or questions or doubts, don't hesitate to reach out to either your local police department. You can contact me. You know, I can answer a lot of questions over the phone, give you generalized guidance on what you should be looking for or what you need to be thinking about. And that goes for, I see at least one of the people up here has a Lakewood banner on their profile. I don't care whether you're in Adams County or not, or in Broomfield. If you have questions, reach out and ask. If it's not my jurisdiction, I can give you general guidance. If I need to direct you to somebody specific, I have contacts at a lot of other law enforcement agencies that I can direct you to. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you. That's a great resource. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah,
Great.
and mine would be call Mark. Do what Mark says.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah and Mark. We really appreciate the information, and thank you all for joining us. And we wish you a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Have a good holiday.
Have a great day. Happy holidays.